Okay, Tina.
Okay. So Rudy asked me to give you a presentation of the fundamentals of setting up a church, or if you have to correct your church in any way, what do you need to do? What are the things you have to have? So let me start by saying, I'm glad Bob's here to correct me if I'm wrong and to also answer questions. So he has served Bob 7 years as his own one-man band of finance, legal, property, business administrator for the conference, and done an awesome job. So as we transition over, we're trying to make things more systematic so that you have resources from the conference educating you on maybe those mundane things that Bob and I are good at in the back office, right? Setting up the structure of the church so that you can go on and do ministry. That's your gift and how you want to bless your community and your church. So if we can take care of that ugly stuff in the background and teach you how to set up your structure, that's our goal, right? We all serve Team Jesus, just a little different capacity. So I am not a lawyer, an expert, or an accountant. I have 33 years business experience as an entrepreneur and have done church books for. So it's been probably 14 years since I started doing church accounting, and lots of experience in what can go wrong when somebody else does it, or you have to assist somebody else in a different church, and the consequences of that within their congregation, within the community, and legally. So that's why we gave it the keep your pastor out of jail and avoid legal issues. So I'm going to share my experience with you and what Bob and I have come up with for kind of guidance. The first is, Rudy, did you send them the outline? Do they have that outline or no? Okay, so we'll just cover it. The first one is, why do you need the IRS? We don't need the IRS, they need us, right? They regulate what we can do and how we do it. And it's primarily, it's income tax, it's revenue to them. So when you're setting up a new church, the first thing you have to have is an EIN number. And I will send you bullet points of our outline and where these resources, where you can see them online, so you don't have to write it all down and take detailed notes. IRS.gov has a search bar, and if you type in EIN number for employer identification number and then hit search, it'll bring you up with all kinds of things. The big one we want is not for profit, not a 501c3 when you file. You're going to file as a not for profit religious organization. And once you have an EIN number, have articles of incorporation, all of those necessary things, you can receive authorization to use the denomination's 501c3 number for your local church. So there's no reason for you to go through the hassle of obtaining your own 501c3. One, it's a lot of work. There are a lot of legalities to it. It's costly, and there are reports that you have to file with the IRS and be under their oversight with much more scrutiny. So if you get your EIN number through that irs.gov, we have a couple requests. Again, this will be to you in bullet points, is that you check in Florida, it's sunbiz.org is our state governance board, right? To be a corporation in Florida. Check and make sure the name that you have chosen for your church, or if you haven't incorporated, because there are some churches that haven't, that you check your name with sunbiz.org, then file for your EIN number first, because you want to make sure that the state you operate in, Florida, has that number available or has that name available. So you might have to tweak your name a little bit to get what you want. If somebody had that number, even if it's inactive, you can't have it for a certain period of time after they're out of existence. So you want to check with Sunbiz, file for your EIN number with the IRS, and you get it instantly. There's a bunch of information I'll include on the sheet that you have to include, like who's the principal of the church. Often that's the pastor, especially in a launch, right, or a church plant. You have a small group of people leading it initially. So you have to provide them a social security number for that person to get an EIN number. They want to know, who are they holding responsible for this church, and that they're following the IRS rules and regulations. So they'll be in your list what you need to have for that. Why should you incorporate? Some churches haven't, and we're trying to get everybody to do it. It's a conference requirement that you be incorporated. As a corporation, you're protecting the individuals in that church, the donors, the staff, the pastor, the conference, and the denomination. With the exception in the event of fraud, the person committing the fraud will not have protection because the church is incorporated. But you're protecting people that are doing their job as they're supposed to, providing ministry. So one very big thing that's good for it. So how do you file? I told you that was irs.gov. We'll give you the list. Again, you do not want to be a 501c3, a not-for-profit religious organization is how you file. When you go to do this, or if you need to check, maybe something's wrong on your documents, addresses, you've changed your name. We found that a lot, huh, Bob, that churches have many different names than what they are registered to be using. We can help you get it so that you're right with the IRS. We just need to guide you through that process, and that's what we're here for. So no shame in asking. That is absolutely why I'm here. After your EIN, you're going to go ahead and file on sunbiz.org for Florida. So to file with Sunbiz, you're going to need articles of incorporation. I don't know, has anybody explored the fmcusa.org website for resources? There are bylaws templates that you have to have bylaws as a corporation. You have to have articles of incorporation. There are all kinds of policies, procedures, background check information. It's just a wealth of resources under fmcusa.org and the resource tab. So good place to look it up. But you can fill out your article of incorporation document on there, do your bylaws, and then file with Sunbiz to be a corporation in the state of Florida. You're going to need the same information as you did for the EIN, but you're also going to need each officer of your board. It may just be an advisory board or panel, whatever you call them right now, that is leading your church as a plant. Each of those officers will have to provide their social security numbers to do that. So, and addresses. Okay. Again, why do you need this? To operate in the state of Florida, you have to be registered with the state of Florida. So a corporation is what we require for that. And sunbiz.org is another fairly easy process if you have all of your documents in order and the information you're going to need. And another thing, we're happy to help you with that. So that's what we're here for. So we're going to move on to finance legalities, right? Money and finances are a tough thing. You know how tough it can be in your own household, right? You spent what? Well, the church is just a bigger marriage, if you will, of people collaborating together to provide ministry. And it's so important to have your finances structured correctly and make sure that you're following some principal rules to protect your staff, your pastor, and again, the people that give at your church. So we're going to talk about the pastor first in regards to financial legalities, okay? Role in money handling. A pastor should never, ever handle the cash of the church. Shouldn't make the deposits, write the checks, count the money, or have a credit card even in the church's name. That is for the pastor's protection as much as it is the church's protection, right? If you don't touch those things, do those things, you can never be accused of things like misappropriation of funds or not putting cash in the bank, or people go crazy. And sometimes the accusations they make are true. Most of the time they're not. But if you have procedures in place and the pastor isn't involved in those parts of the church, he's above reproach on it. There's nothing they can accuse him of. He doesn't touch the money. So even if you're small and you only have a few people, do not put the pastor in the position of having to do, and many of you, that's you, the pastor, in the position of having to do those things. That have somebody that's a trusted value member of your leadership team oversee the counting. There's much more to go in detail on those things, like 2 people should always count. The money should be in a safe, secure place, like a small safe, even a little one, So it's locked up. Nobody can ever be accused of getting in there if they don't know the combination and don't have a key, right? So it sounds extreme, but we don't want them to be accused of something they did not do. And when your church knows that things are handled in a systematic way and that there's oversight and accountability, things just go much easier. Reimbursement for expenses for pastors. Pastors' expenses that involve the church or activities for the church are reimbursable when documentation is provided, like receipts. And there's reimbursement forms that are used that you attach or send the receipt with it to make it something that can be reimbursed without being taxable income to the pastor. If the pastor writes off $500 in things and has 0 receipts, the IRS law is that is taxable income to the pastor. He didn't provide any documentation to show that they were used, what they were, and that they were used for the church. Mileage, there's mileage reports where you have to fill in specifically where you went, you know, kind of what it was for briefly, but those things are all reimbursable and are not taxable income to the pastor, so long as they're documented and substantiated with backup. So if you know this going into it, and start out your church, or maybe you haven't known it for a church you have now, implement those kind of things so that you're covered, right? You don't want to avoid paying taxes or be in trouble with the IRS. Part of the legal issue is, did you commit fraud in a pastor's pay or a staff's pay? Same thing applies to the staff. No receipts, no form. You can't give them the money. It's taxable income you're giving them instead without those documents. So, okay, housing allowance. You're probably familiar with this, but I'm going to hit it on it briefly. I'm sure Bob knows this one much better than I. So the housing allowance for a pastor has to be approved by your leadership team or board prior to them ever receiving a check for it. So say you're launching a church April 1st. You haven't prepared a budget, you haven't had a board meeting to approve housing allowance, pastor salary, or staff salary. If you pay the pastor housing allowance or a staff that is eligible for housing allowance before the board has approved it, it is taxable income to them up to the point the board approves it. So it sounds, we're kind of the no fun police, Bob and I. We're the no fun police. But you need to know these things, like have your budget passed with all of those things on there first. It's the pastor's responsibility to track his housing expenses to make sure that they are not less than his housing allowance. If the church pays a pastor $30,000 in housing allowance for a year and his housing expenses don't equal up to that $30,000, he or she is required to pay income tax on the difference. So I'm going to give you in your outline more resources from the FMC and another organization about what is tax deductible for housing allowance. There are many things, the curtains, the blinds, all kinds of things that you can include in there besides your mortgage payment or rent and your insurance and taxes. So good things to know that'll keep you out of some trouble. So as I said, when you pass the housing allowance, the pastor's salary also needs to be approved by the leadership team. Okay, and that is on the budget. And it needs to be done before the first pay is issued to the pastor. So changes happen throughout the year. You can adjust it. You can always go down and still be within your budget and not have to change it. But if you go above what's in the budget, it needs reapproved before you can issue it. Now we're going to kind of switch gears and go to staff and volunteers. So about good systems or functions that they can do for the church. Counters and money handlers, and this involves finance. You need a person, as I said, in leadership to be responsible for taking the money, counting the money, making sure it gets in the bank, all of that. They don't have to do it every single time, but they have to be responsible for it, provide oversight. Having 2 people count money that are not the pastor and that are not related to one another is imperative. Again, it's another accountability factor to the donors of that money and to your church. So having the money in a safe place. Let's see. things just as simple as who takes the money out and how. 2 people should be present when it comes out of the safe. And I realize when you're small, this is awkward, but drag somebody with you, right, that sees it. So it's not you opened the safe and got money out or a staff member did. They protect the people and the church. So a banking, as we said, the pastor should not be on a bank account or have a credit card in the church's name. It sounds rough, but it protects the integrity of everybody involved and puts them under no scrutiny in the public eye. You will need your EIN number that we talked about as the first step. Your SunBiz, Articles of Incorporation, is another document. And minutes from your board meeting, when you approve all of those things, you'll also want to have in your minutes authorizing specific people to go on a bank account and giving them the authority to do so in the church's name. But you will need all of those documents to go to the bank and open up a new account. Is anybody sleeping yet? Where'd Rudy go? Oh, there he is. He moved. He was up top. Okay. If you get credit cards in the church's name, there needs to be accountability and safeguards put into place about where is the card stored, who can use it, when do they have to turn in receipts. I don't know if many of you know this, but I worked with Pastor Mike back up in Pennsylvania and he probably hated me back then. Hate's a hard word, but I always hit him up for his receipts. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Like, I'm not giving you a check until you give me the receipt. The same goes with the credit cards. You have to have receipts for that, or again, it puts the person using the card or whose name the card is in at the lucky position of having declared as personal income without receipts. And it's being a good steward of the resources that people have donated to your church for use of the church, right? Making sure it's spent how it's supposed to be spent, who used it, do we have receipts for everything? Very important things. And I loved bugging Mike about it. It was great. So, budget adherence. Your advisory board, like we said, will do a budget. There should be line items on there, or sections, if you will, of the budget that are specifically designated, say children's ministry or outreach, youth, camps, whatever you're doing, annual conference, whatever your church provides funds for, obviously the salary and housing allowance and salary of staff, an administrative section for utilities, phone, copiers, basic things. Like if you group it out in specific areas that we're happy to help you set up, then you can manage the budget throughout the year and make sure that those departments are sticking within their budget. Worship ministry is probably the most expensive one I've seen because the equipment is so expensive, right? It's crazy expensive. So you need to know throughout the year where you are. Where do you stand in the budget? Is somebody overspending and we need to reel them back in? Because we don't want to spend ministry money from other areas like children's or youth on another department. They have a budget and they need to stick to it. So very, very important with the finances of the church. The budget can be changed as the year goes. Obviously, every single time you have a leadership team meeting or board meeting, the person doing your bookkeeping needs to provide the board with documents, financial documents, statement of activity, financial position, cash flow, right? The board needs to see that every single meeting and review it. So if they could be given it like a week ahead of time, that's the recommendation, so they can look at it and say, something doesn't look right here. If we're not checking those documents, and I cannot give you names, but there was just a massive blunder that almost derailed a 400-person church because nobody saw financial documents. And as a leadership team, how do you make decisions if you don't know where your church is at? Can they afford it? Where's the money going? Who's spending it? Those are very, very important. And part of getting that good information is also having a bookkeeper. I know small churches can't necessarily afford it. And I probably wasn't so good when I started out doing it, but I learned and sought to seek out the correct way to do things. but it's so important, again, because money is a huge thing for people to get just weird over, right? Get angry over, to leave a church over. So bookkeepers can have the best of intention, but if you're not looking at the financial reports to say something doesn't look right, then you're kind of not holding them accountable too. And I've seen very well-intentioned bookkeepers forget to pay payroll taxes. I'll own it. At our church back in Pennsylvania, when I took over, a girl did not know how to pay the payroll taxes for 2 years. The payroll taxes were withheld from the employees. She got scared. So when the IRS, this is not funny, but it is, when the IRS started sending certified letters and going to levy the property and the bank accounts, she stuck them in a drawer because she was scared to say, I don't know what I'm doing, and it got out of control. Best intentions in the world, but I can tell you it was a very stressful mess for a couple of years to get it cleaned up, but we did. So best of intentions, but things get mixed up. If they don't balance bank statements monthly, you don't actually have financial accurate records because there could be things overstated, understated, maybe by double entries or not entered at all. And you don't know if they don't balance the bank statements. So they can fail to provide giving statements to donors, creates an ugly thing within the church membership, right? And there are consequences for that. If they don't make sure the receipts are included for expenses on credit cards, again, that undeclared income goes to people without paying taxes, and the IRS frowns upon that. So, sounds harsh, hold your breath, we're getting there, we're almost done, and then you can ask me questions. Or I prefer if you ask Bob questions. So you can say, hey, Bob, ask Bob. Okay, we're gonna talk about donations and giving. These are not all encompassing of the types of donations and giving that can be done to a church, but these are the most typical. Again, I'll provide you a resource that describes them in detail. You'll probably fall asleep and pull your hair out trying to read them, but it's important to at least know the gist of it. So there are tax deductible donations that a church receives, most common. So people give funds to the church and they're tax deductible to the donor as long as the donor receives nothing in return for that money. That's the key to it all, and the key to setting up your accounting system so that they're recorded correctly. So if they give it and receive nothing, it goes on a giving statement as tax deductible for them at the end of the year. Non-deductible would be when they can give money to the church, maybe their kids in youth group, and they're paying for them to go on a trip or do something. That is not tax deductible because they're receiving something back for it. It may not be in the tangible in your hand, but they're getting something for it. Their kids going on a trip or their family members doing something. You can give to mission trips as long as it's not you or a family member that you're giving specifically for that mission trip. That would be not tax deductible. So if I give money to the church because I know Bob's in a tight spot and I want the church to write a check to Bob, not tax deductible. It's almost, dare we use the words, money laundering. I'm saying, hey, give this to somebody else with me getting a giving right on my tax deductible giving statement, and Bob getting it as non-taxable income. Can't be done.
However, it is a worthy use of your money.
To give it to you?
Yes.
So there are things like that you think, you can give benevolence, but if somebody gives specifically for you to give it in the church's name to that person, it cannot be tax deductible to them. There are certain ways to give to benevolence, right, without doing it that way. We're not going to discuss those, but there are ways to do things that make them legally, you're able to do it. So we're going to move on to in-kind contributions. So a plumber from your church comes in and replumbs the whole bathroom, right? And hands you a receipt and says, this is what it would cost you to pay for my labor. You cannot give someone a giving statement, right? A giving letter or donation letter for labor or services.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do it. So it is a very commonly asked for thing, but you cannot do it. You can reimburse them for any receipts they have for material. They can also get reimbursed for mileage at a charitable pittance of a rate of 14 cents a mile, I think it is for this year still. So they can get reimbursed for the expenses they incurred, that they physically incurred those expenses, material, supplies, those kinds of things. But they cannot get a letter from the church stating that they donated that value. It brings us on to tangible personal property. Somebody gives to the church, they make the youth group a whole bunch of t-shirts and donate it to the youth group. It's a tangible thing. So you can give them a giving letter for that item, or they donate furniture or sound, they buy the pastor a computer. Something like that can be an in-kind contribution. It's just services and labor cannot be. Okay. And there are different directed givings that I'm not going to go into a whole big discussion because it's very confusing for me to grasp, but I'm sure your minds are ready to blow now. We're not going to totally beat you up tonight, but there are different kinds of directed giving that can be done with a church. If you have a capital campaign or a specific fundraising event, again, as long as the person is getting nothing for it, like the youth group situation with their own child, but you have a capital campaign for the church, they can donate, say it's got to go to that specific thing. You are bound by law to spend it on that specific thing. You can't pay wages and utilities and things like that, send it to another source. You have to keep track of it, and it has to go for those expenses. And it is tax deductible for the person on their giving statement, right? However, if they give it's wonky to say it. If they give money for something specific, like I'm giving this money to youth group, and it has nothing to do with their child or family member, it's tax deductible. The church doesn't have to spend it on youth group because they're giving the donation to the church and asking it be directed, but the person has no control over that, like they do a capital campaign fund. And again, you guys are going to have resources, because I'm sure you're all going to want to sit down and read through the 200 and whatever page document I'm going to send you the link for. But all of this is in there with specific detail. So my point tonight is to show you some of the most common things and maybe give you some insight. I know back north that the delegate and I went to annual conference, and we decided to attend Mark Dowley's first year. He did the Keep Your Pastor Out of Jail thing, and the delegate had been there several years for our church. And he is asthmatic. I've never seen him take his inhaler out, but during Mark Dowley's speech, he puffed on his inhaler 3 times. Great stuff. So it's important because it keeps your church able to do the ministry you're supposed to do. It keeps you within the IRS guidelines, so nobody's in trouble for tax evasion. It makes your people of your church happy when they see you're being good stewards of what they give to your church, right? No matter what it goes for. And it gives everybody accountability. So, Bob, can you think of anything that I have skipped or left off? Is Bob on there?
I saw Rudy's hand go up. I thought he was.
Yeah, Bob, you go ahead, Bob, and then I'm going, take a couple minutes. That way you and Bob, I have a few answers for couple pastor. I would like to answer the question, Bob.
Okay.
Do you want Bob answer Tina, or I start reading the question?
Well, I think we should start addressing the questions.
Yes, okay. Well, Pastor Anya, how you doing today? I see you right like you. I would like to hear more about reason for credit card not being available to pastor.
Mm-hmm.
First,
we have some at our church for our staff for expenses that they basically for the budgets, so it's things like airline tickets for mission trips, or we don't use it for our personal expenses. We use it for ministry budgeted items. And I understand not maybe wanting to have a debit card that's connected directly to the bank account, but I wasn't sure if you were saying no credit cards at all.
It is suggested no credit cards at all. And I believe that's on the FMC's pastor deal too, is no credit cards at all. If you do have one, because I understand the suggested method is have the pastor pay for it. If he pays for it on his personal card and turns in the receipts timely for reimbursement and is reimbursed, he's not going to incur extra charges or interest on his card. And it's a form of accountability and keeping your pastor above any accusations that could happen. Some churches do have their pastors have a credit card. You have to be so diligent to scrutinize that statement, get every receipt. It has to be timely. And again, it's protecting your pastor, your staff, and your church, right? From any accusations. And that is a common, we'll just call it the $400,000 church. Went extremely awry, the pastor with his credit cards, and nobody questioned him because he told them what they were for. So when we went back through the credit card statements, instead of providing a receipt, he would just write next to it what it was for. And they did not feel they had the right to question the pastor. After all, he's the pastor of the church. Yeah. You don't know how much poo-poo that has made now that he's gone for that church and for the staff. So there's good reason for it. And if you have good controls on it, you could, but you have to be very specific, because most of the time the pastor's not bad. That's rare. But there's always the accusations that people make, and oh, he's doing this and he's buying that. And I see him getting coffee. Well, he's getting coffee to meet with a parishioner, right? Like somebody, a member of the church or prospective, but people don't see it that way. So there's two ways to do it. And the suggestion is that they use their own card and file for reimbursement. So that somebody, when they're paying that reimbursement, they see it, they can control whether he gets paid for it or not. Where if they have a credit card, they can just keep charging on it. So I can tell you the 400 church, the pastor charged on it for 3 months after he was gone because he got the credit card at the bank in the church's name, but we could not close that card out without him signing to have it closed because he opened it. So there are legitimate reasons, and it sounds kind of crazy, but it really does happen. Did that answer your question?
But you have any suggestion about that credit card, or?
That's just the first time I'd heard that. So I was just trying to figure out what really was behind it, especially a credit card from a different financial institution versus the bank. Yeah, so it's good to know. It's good to hear.
Can I say something, Bob, or I keep going with the question? Let me.
Pastor Jeffrey has a comment.
Yeah, Bob, give me 1 second, because Pastor Manny also write down about credit card. Can you explain that, Pastor Manny, please, what you try to say?
Yeah, sure. Just very briefly, speaking to the credit card situation, I can speak firsthand. Working in a ministry in the past, a church where the pastor did have credit card access, it was devastating to the church, and there was just a long trail after he left of financial abuse and things that we couldn't find that were charged to that card. And so I could just tell you right now, because I was on the leadership team that was going through that stuff when that happened. And it is not a good place to be. It is devastating to not only the pastor, but also to the church. And I can't tell you how badly that really hurt our church's finances, but also our church's testimony when we had to give an account for that.
Thank you, Pastor. Pastor Jeffrey, what question do you have for us?
I guess this is to Tina when she was talking about 501c3. Church on Wheels Spoken Word has a 501c3 designation. Should I get rid of that, reincorporate as a nonprofit organization?
I would say no, because you went through the trouble to get it, and you must be filing your annual filings, right?
Yes, yes.
Or they'd be banging on your door.
Yeah. From what I heard, from what I'm hearing, that there's no need for the 501c3, that I can incorporate and set it up as a nonprofit and not worry about the 501c3.
That is correct, as long as the denomination, if you're in good standing with the denomination, right? You've got your EIN number, your articles of incorporation,
Yes,
your
yes,
Southeast Region
yes,
Conference has approved you. We send all of your documents to the denomination requesting, they get you entered as a Church of the Free Methodist or affiliate, or
yes.
then
Well, Bob
you request
knows.
the 501c3, you can use theirs. They give you a letter specifically stating that you can use theirs. They file with the IRS listing your church as being under them to use their 501c3.
Okay. So, all right. I
don't know if
understand
I
what
change it because you got it. That's the hard thing. And you're doing your filings.
right.
Let me think on that.
Right. But what I'm saying is, because the Free Methodist has a 501c3 and I would come under the umbrella, if I dissolve and reincorporate as a nonprofit, will I fall under the FMC 501c3, which would give my donors the opportunity to write off? Can that happen?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's what I need to know. Thank you.
Do you have your documents you could email to me or Bob? Like your articles of incorporation with Florida?
Yes.
And your statement, you have a statement from the IRS acknowledging your 501c3, right? They do that.
Yes. We got all of that. Those? It's just that from what I heard is that I can dissolve that to come from under that legality and incorporate as a nonprofit, and then fall under, then grandfather in with the FMC under their 501c3, which would give my donors a legitimate opportunity to write off.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can I do that?
Yes.
Okay.
And the big difference with the 501c3 is churches are the exception to receive donations, right? If you're set up as a nonprofit religious organization with the IRS, is different than being a 501c3. Now, I know to receive corporate contributions and from business, they will not usually give to a church unless you have a 501c3.
Right.
You would be able to use the denominations instead of what you have now. I believe with Sunbiz, you could amend your articles of incorporation. I think the problem will be with the IRS. So I would have to look into it to see if you would have to dissolve, or could you amend your filings with the both of those.
Okay, because dissolving that wouldn't be, that's a quick one-day deal for us. We're a small church. It's just, I'm just thinking, but thank you so very much. You gave me a piece of information. Thank you.
Bob, can you raise your hand? Do you want to ask something about this?
Yes, I think we need to take a step back and clarify something. What Pastor Jeffrey is asking about now is not what Tina was talking about before. Pastor Jeffrey's, from my experience, Pastor Jeffrey's best track would be to call Mark Daly in Indianapolis and ask them specifically how you get from where you are to where you want to be. Because what I think I heard you say is that Church on Wheels was incorporated and went through the 501 process completely independent of the Free Methodist Church denominationally. If that's true, then they need to help you come under the umbrella. So that's a special situation. When we're talking about a brand new church getting started, as you're applying for an EIN, there's a special sequence of events to click on to automatically be under the denomination's umbrella. And once you get your EIN, starting brand new and fresh, send that information to Indianapolis and they inform the IRS that you are legitimately under the umbrella, relieving a brand new church of having to apply for a 501c3 all by themselves. You don't want to do that. It takes forever and it's expensive. So the IRS changes that sequence every so often. And the folks in Indianapolis know exactly what that sequence is at any given time. So if you're starting something brand new, the first step is check on your Secretary of State for your state. And I've listed them all here in the chat box, the web links. See if the name you want is available. And then apply for the EIN as fast as you can. And that's like a 30-minute process. And then you can do two things. Once you get the EIN, you immediately notify Indianapolis, and then you go on your Secretary of State's website and lock in that name. And in Florida, that's like $100. And that's also a 30-minute process. And then it's $61 every year to renew it with the current list of officers for your corporation. So we were really talking about two different things here, because I'm seeing people who are wanting to start something new, and Pastor Jeffrey was asking a totally different question.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that clarification. And the reason I say this is because I had a conversation with one of Pastor friend. I'm not going to say the name, okay? Bob. It's very important of church planting people, what Bob said, when it's brand new, then I would like Tina or Bob can explain what they need to do. They are a new church planting people, want to get the 501c3, what the step they need to do. Please, church planting, writing this information is very important. By the way, we're going to send it. Everybody give me the email. You're going to send all this information. We're going to send to you before the end this week. Check it out, your email, okay? But Bob or Tina can explain what the step they need to do?
That is kind of what we started with you have to have your EIN number, get registered with SunBiz or your state authority, right? Department of State.
Okay, the number one is what you say?
Register with the IRS.
Okay.
No, that's
actually
not step one.
That's
step one is seeing if your name is available in the state.
Right. That list of, you have to check your name first before you go waste your time registering it with the IRS, only to have to redo it and pay for it again. So check with your state, Department of State, to see if that name is available with the Corporation Bureau, right? Make sure you can have that name or you're wasting your time. If you have to alter it, tweak it a little bit to make it as close to what you want, that's what you have to do, okay? So first, you also have to have your leadership team needs to approve these things for you to be able to proceed, right? What gives you the authority to do it unless you have the permission, right? You can call it whatever team you want, your board, your leadership team, whatever, your launch team, whatever you call it. You need to be more than one person to be able to do this and have authority to do it. And that authority to pursue the EIN number, to register with the state, and have all of that information about the officers, you have to really get going on any of it. So that's your setting that up first. Then the EIN number, right? Once you make sure your name's good, the EIN number, registering with the Department of State. The sales tax exemption, I think I skipped that, but once you're a not-for-profit religious organization in your state, typically Florida, you can get sales tax exemption, but you have to register separately for the Department of Revenue for Florida to be able to do that. That saves you money on whatever you buy to fix in your church, do ministry in your church, that sound equipment, that's silly money. You know, that's all money that you can save in sales tax and put it back into your ministry. It's good stewardship for your church. So when you have yourself those primary things. You don't have to have the sales tax, but the EIN registered with your state, and we have your documents at the conference, you can forward your documents, or we can forward them to the FMC for you. And then you can request 501c3 to use their 501c3 exemption. And that normally, it doesn't take very long, a couple days maybe, to get a letter from, I believe it's Elizabeth Goodberry still doing it for Mark, right? Bob does the letter and sends it to you with your specific name. They file, they do it. You don't have to do anything. It's fairly simple for the churches. The denomination has to file with the IRS, adding you to the list that can use their 501c3.
Think of it in terms of being adopted.
Okay. All right. Now, Pastor Marquia was talking about specific about that. He say, how do we have asset? Let me start. 501c3. How do we have asset to that from the denomination? Then,
if you're an already existing church in good standing with the denomination and the conference, you send a request to Elizabeth Goodberry at FMC and ask for it. It's really a simple process.
But my understanding is, before to do that, we need to do those steps you mentioned before, right?
If you're newer, you do not have those things. Yes, you should. You have to do those. But if you are in good standing with them and they have your documents, they will give you authority to use that. So if you're new, you have to go those steps and get those documents, have them set you up in the system, right? Once they receive those documents from you or from the conference, and then you request it. So it's not going to be today, tomorrow, which you have to have everything and be in their system as an affiliate, whatever you are with the denomination, and they've approved you. They can obviously turn you down, but if you're good standing with the denomination, they do not.
Let me make question about you. Let's say I'm a church planting, but I don't have the 501c3. But I have people coming every Sunday to the church, and then we collect offering and tithe. Do I supposed to do that or no?
No, if you are not established as a nonprofit religious organization, you should not be taking money. That would be taxable income to whoever they're giving it to, right? So if they're giving it to the pastor, if they're giving it to somebody at the door, whoever's taking that money can't just take it, put it in their own account, because you cannot open a bank account at the bank without the EIN number, board minutes saying you can open an account, and your articles of incorporation. They won't let you do it. You have to have, I can't speak for Louisiana because weird things happen in Louisiana, as Bob and I can attest, but Florida and most states, you cannot open a bank account without an EIN number in your name. So you cannot take money from people until you properly set up, or you can't give them a giving statement for it. You're not a properly licensed or registered with the state or the IRS to give them a donation letter. So that is a big no-no. Like, you got to have these things done first.
Okay. Before money, hold the question, because, well, let's say, okay, now I'm a wedding, I cannot do it. What I need to do then, let's say for the next Sunday, I go for the next Sunday, do I need to don't take the money, or what I do?
I'm going to ask for Bob's opinion because I have my own opinion, but I'm probably tougher on this one than Bob.
Please.
I'm not really clear on the question yet. Try me again.
Okay, let's say the first thing I understand, because I don't have the 501c3, I cannot collect the money every Sunday when the people want to offering and give you the money. Now I understand this is wrong. But then next Sunday, then what I need to do if they want to give you the money, stop it, or what I need to say to them, or how can I fix that problem? Because I don't know. Now I know.
Well, if we've gone to the second Sunday and you're still not through the 30-minute process to get an EIN and register it with the denomination, then tell them you apologize for being lazy.
That's him. That's him. If you don't know Bob, that's the way he is, okay? We love you. We love him about that. Thank you, Bob.
I don't know what other answer there is. It's so easy to do this correctly. Monday, you do the EIN. You don't even have, well, yeah, you probably do have to register with the state, but that's 30 minutes. And then you go to the bank. If you can get an appointment these days, that would be the longest part, just to get a bank account.
Okay.
We're trying to do that now, and we can't get an appointment for 2 weeks.
Good. Okay, Manny, any?
One thing I want to add on here, Anya asked a question, is there a minimum number of board members or officers you need that's recommended? And I would say absolutely yes. You need a president, which is usually the pastor. Don't call him pastor. The state you live in and the IRS doesn't care he's a pastor. He needs to be president of that corporation.
Yep.
You need a treasurer and a secretary, because when you go to the bank, you're going to need minutes signed by the secretary, and you're going to need to declare a treasurer for that account. And those two people should be the signers on that account, not the pastor president. Bob's rule is the pastor never touches the money.
Amen.
The old timers on this call have heard me say that already. The pastor is not involved in collecting the money on Sunday. He's not involved in counting it, and he's not involved taking it to the bank. Amen. Period. He is not in possession of any credit card, debit card, any card from the church. He can submit receipts for reimbursement. That's it. Very simple. I'm the treasurer of the church here in the park. I'm watching the credit cards. There's 5 of them. I don't get receipts for some of those expenses. What am I supposed to do? I don't even know what it's for. So I can't even put it in the QuickBooks. I don't even know who did it. So credit cards are a big problem. If I was starting a church and I could get by with it, I wouldn't have a credit card for the church. I would require anybody to spend their own money and give me the receipt. Now I know who and for what. But that's just me. President, secretary, treasurer.
Yes.
Manny, do you have something to say before someone we're going to be closing here today?
Just real quick regarding the 501c3. I know that for us and our church, we applied for the 501c3, and I know the IRS is a little backed up with the backlog stuff. And so from what we were told by our accountant is that even though we submitted the application and we haven't yet gotten a letter back telling us that we have officially been certified as a 501c3, that when you submit the application, the IRS will still consider you technically a 501c3 as long as the application is submitted and it's in the process.
I would say be careful, because what if they reject it and say, no, you're up a creek?
Yeah, so. And we had discussed that too. And so and the only reason why is because they had already been through something similar like that with another church. And so with us, we had to make sure that it was done properly, because one of the things that they ran into, and I don't know how it is in other states, but I know in Florida, there was a thing where at one point they did electronic application and then they wanted the book, the actual thick book. But yeah, so I don't know if you guys had any information on that or if there was anything that had changed, but that's something that we were told that that can happen.
Send that to a Mark Dowley or Elizabeth Goodberry. Sometimes answers fast. That's its secretary. She'll answer faster than Mark usually, because she'll go in and say, hey, and ask for an answer right there. But well,
that's the advantage of being a connectional church and a member of the denomination rather than an independent church. Applying for your own 501c3 as an independent church kind of thing. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just that Free Methodist churches are not independent churches.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of question, Pastor Jeffrey's question, is an Elizabeth Goodberry question, because that's her job to keep on top of that stuff.
But let me say something. In Manny's case, he's a new pastor came from United, Free Methodist United, right? Now he's independent, and he don't know this thing. Is any way then he can change that? Say, oh, okay, then if the denomination cover for 501c3, then he can stop it, the process, or no? That's my question.
I'm saying ask Elizabeth, because
okay,
part of the filing for your EIN number and the 501c3 status is you declaring it differently, that instead of a not-for-profit religious organization, you're declaring something else when you apply for your EIN number.
Well,
so that is a legal kind of thing that I don't want to speculate on something like that.
Pastor Rudy, I would recommend that when you talk to the superintendent next, that you would recommend that the MEG board inform pastors coming in from the United Methodist Church or from anywhere else that there's a process. The MEG board is the starting point for having this conversation, not here. And that would have saved Pastor Manny lots of headaches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. That's before we closing, Bob, you say about something about housing allowing.
I dropped in the current housing allowance form in the chat box. You can just click it and
if somebody wants to see it,
fill it out.
Got it.
Okay.
Tina,
I have a question.
Sure.
Yes, Mary.
Yes, so for the three people that you were saying, like the president, the treasury, and the secretary, did you say the pastor cannot be the president?
No.
The pastor should be the president.
Should be.
Yes, he should be listed as president, not pastor.
Right.
Exactly.
But then he doesn't have anything to do with the money.
No, but this is of the board, right? So it's the general oversight of the church.
Okay,
okay. The pastor is, for the Book of Discipline, is the president of the board, whatever you call it. Okay. They don't have a vote, but they conduct the meeting, right? Help set the budget, but it's up to the board to pass the budget, approving the budget. So you need at least those three, and the delegate should be on the board, is either one of those positions, right? It's recommended, I think I'm trying to remember, was the Book of Discipline says like 5 to 9 people. And there's a reason. So you want a little diversity in opinion and life experiences is the reason 5 is a minimum request. And it's so that 3 people can't steer the whole ship, right? There's other input into that. Is 1. If you go over 9, and even when you get to 9, you have people miss meetings. It's just crazy how many people, I'm going to serve, and then they don't show up. And sometimes you have difficulty having a quorum when you need something important handled, urgently. And it also makes for a lot of chaos. If you're just filling those seats to get 9 people, then you can create a lot of way down in your board. So you want enough diversity of people's perspectives and life experiences, but don't make it crazy to where you're just spinning all the time trying to come to a decision. That makes sense.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
It's 9 o'clock. I would like to say we're going to have next month where Tina, I don't know, you was in number 3, insure recruitment. That was the one you stopped there?
Yes, we just did. We got the first 2 of them.
And then, okay, next month we're going to try another 2. Now, any question?
Can you, Rudy, can you share your screen with me? Bob can tell you how to do that because I forget. Do I have to be co-host with him?
I'm sorry, Tina. What is it that you're going to do next month?
We are going to cover insurance, and there's a whole nother topic.
The setting the board, the leader team.
The leadership team of your church, how and why that should be structured the way it is, and what are the duties and responsibilities, and
okay,
obviously the liability that goes with it.
Do me a favor, Tina.
Yes.
Bob, Manny, and Melkia, stay with me, okay?
Okay.
But before we go, Jason, can you please pray for us before we go?
Don't hang up when he's done, because I have a document I have to show you, or Rudy can share the screen and I will show you. I promise it's worth the wait.
I'm going to send them or everything what you said.
No, they got to see this, Rudy, for putting up with this.
Okay, then let me make call Manny. 1 second.
Okay.
Manny, let me stop the recording.
You mean this?